My online PhD girlfriend is a substitute teacher, but right now, that's the last thing on my mind. Halfway through the second lap of the 800-meter fitness test, I slammed face first into a brutal wall of absolute exhaustion. My heart was hammering against my ribs, thrashing around like it was desperately trying to break right out of my chest. My feet? They felt like they were cast in solid lead. My breathing rhythm was an absolute wreck. Heavy, ragged, wheezing rattled deep in my throat, sounding exactly like a busted old pair of bellows. Every single breath I managed to suck in came with a sharp, searing stab of pure pain. My head was spinning, completely dazed, and the edges of my vision kept fading to black. Only pure, stubborn instinct was forcing me to drag my miserable self forward. Keep moving, keep breathing. That was literally all that mattered. I had my wireless earbuds jammed in, and out of nowhere, the cheesy, bass-heavy background music I had on repeat just snapped off. The familiar, sudden chime of an incoming call rang straight through. A split second later, the voice of Vivian, my long-distance girlfriend, burst directly into my eardrums. Her usually cool, gentle tone carried this crazy, rare note of total panic and tension, thick with obvious anxiety. "Babe, what are you doing?" With only half a lap left to survive, my energy was entirely wiped out, and I was teetering right on the verge of dry heaving. There was zero chance I could answer her properly. Even so, I instinctively tried to choke out a reply to her question. Ragged, desperate gasps tangled up with my heavily muffled words. Ow, holy crap. Before I could even spit the sentence out, a sudden rush of heavy footsteps stomped up right up behind me. Some classmate running in my blind spot suddenly hit the gas. As he shot past me, his shoulder slammed wildly into my side. A crushing wave of brute force sent me reeling backward. I stumbled violently before finally catching my balance, but the phone I had clenched in my hand, it flew right out of my sweaty grip. It tumbled violently across the rubber track, instantly skidding far, far away from me. The Bluetooth connection instantly snapped, leaving absolutely nothing in my ears except the roaring wind and the obnoxious shouting of the huge crowd. I didn't even have a single second to freak out about my dropped phone. Staring dead at the finish line just a few yards away, my brain flashed to the absolute nightmare of having to retake this hellish test if I failed. I gritted my teeth, clenched my painfully aching fists, and forced my jello legs to pump with raw, desperate determination. I practically dragged my half-dead body across that final stretch. My final time locked in at exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds. I had barely, by the absolute skin of my teeth, scraped past the passing line. It wasn't pretty at all, but hey, at least I didn't have to suffer a redo, which was a massive, life-saving relief. The exact second I crossed that line, my legs gave out and shook violently. Every single ounce of strength was completely, utterly drained from my frail body. My head furiously throbbed and spun in brutal, agonizing waves. A wildly dizzy, totally nauseating sensation crashed heavily right over me. Not daring to just collapse onto the turf right away, I desperately gripped the soccer goalpost on the field to somehow stay upright, barely managing to stabilize my violently swaying body as I waited for the intense dizziness and bone-deep exhaustion to finally pass. It wasn't until my gym teacher, Mr. Davis, loudly called my name to scan my code and log my awful score that I suddenly snapped right out of my daze. Suddenly, remembering my phone abandoned back on the track, I dragged my aching, totally numb legs and stumbled back, step by shaking step, to rescue it. As my foggy mind slowly cleared up, Vivian's wildly panicked voice from earlier kept echoing heavily in my head. She was usually so incredibly quiet and reserved, so gentle and calm, and she rarely ever lost her cool composure. Yet just a minute ago, her tone had been bursting with absolute, unmistakable panic. All at once, the grueling exhaustion from the 800-meter run, totally crashing into a sudden wave of bitter self-pity, welled up deep inside me, making my eyes sting with hot tears. An 800-meter run might be an absolute joke to literally anyone else, but I had been tragically frail and physically pathetic since childhood. My body was just naturally delicate. Every single fitness test was pure, unadulterated torture for me. Overflowing with a deep, pathetic sense of self-pity, I planned to spam her with a dozen voice notes later, just to heavily complain about how this horrific test had practically killed me. Looking up, the finish line was totally packed with ridiculously sweet, comforting couples. My roommate's girlfriend had been patiently waiting right there for him, and the exact moment he crossed the finish line, she rushed right over to hand him an ice-cold sports drink. Her eyes were so incredibly full of warmth and affection that it genuinely stung to watch. My desperate longing for Vivian peaked at that exact moment. More than anything in the world, I wished there was someone waiting at that finish line to catch me in all my exhausted, utterly pathetic glory. But Vivian and I were stuck in a brutal long-distance relationship, living entirely across a digital screen. We had never even met in person, separated by hundreds of endless miles. Even a simple, warm hug was a completely impossible luxury. I finally bent down and picked up my dropped phone. Luckily, the glass screen was somehow completely intact, but the very second I unlocked it, a massive, overwhelming wall of missed calls and message notifications instantly flooded my entire screen. Every single one was from Vivian. My heart totally skipped a beat. Vivian absolutely hated sending voice notes. She always said it just wasn't convenient, since she spent all her precious time stuck in quiet libraries and labs. We had always strictly stuck to texting, keeping things super quiet and totally reserved. But today, our chat log was absolutely jam-packed with dozens of panicked voice notes. The sheer freakiness of it all made my heart pound out of my chest. With shaking fingers, I tapped on the very first voice note at the top. Her voice was trembling violently, filled with sheer panic, and completely coming apart at the seams. "Babe, what are you doing? What was that sound just now? It's not what it sounds like, right?" By the second note, her voice was already thick with tears. "I just heard another guy's voice, and you were dry heaving. Who on earth are you with?" The messages that followed grew insanely frantic. Every single word was dripping with absolute agonizing insecurity. "Have you forgotten about me? Can we please meet tomorrow? I will come find you right now. Please don't leave me. Babe, please just answer me. Even typing a single letter is fine." By the last few voice notes, she had completely broken down into heavy, gut-wrenching sobs. Her voice was raspy and shattered, weeping so hard she couldn't even form a coherent sentence. Her raw heartbreak and overwhelming terror hit me full force, right through the screen. My chest tightened painfully, instantly forgetting my brutal physical exhaustion. All I wanted to do was comfort her right away, but my throat was so dry and raw that I couldn't even make a sound. So, I frantically tapped on my keyboard to apologize. "I am so sorry. I was just doing my 800-meter physical fitness test. I am so sorry I made you worry." After firing off the apology, I kept typing. I was getting ready to whine to her about how brutal the 800-meter sprint was, and how utterly unfair it was for a fragile undergrad like me. I just wanted to vent about how much my weak, pathetic stamina sucked. But before I could even finish drafting the text, she replied almost instantly. It was a single, freezing line of text that sent a sudden icy shiver straight down my spine. "You are lying. Graduate students do not have to take fitness tests." My fingertips froze instantly on the screen, and my mind went completely blank. Oh, crap. I am totally busted. Vivian and I actually met in the comments section of an online lecture course. Back then, I was just a clueless college freshman cramming for finals, completely lost, staring blankly at a screen full of nightmare physics problems. My dad was way too swamped with his own teaching and research to even help me out. Unable to decode the dense online lectures, I posted a desperate plea for help in the comments, praying for a miracle. Before long, Vivian, who was working on her doctorate, sent me a private message. She kindly broke down every single impossibly complex problem just for me. To make things easier, we added each other on WeChat, and over time we grew closer and closer. Eventually, we became a couple. Her life was incredibly simple and highly disciplined, revolving entirely around a strict, daily routine. She spent all day buried in the lab, reading heavy academic literature and writing research papers. It was a quiet, almost monotonous life. I wasn't exactly the studious type, so I usually just shared photos of my daily meals, nice scenery, or my latest pair of sneakers. Our lives moved on completely different tracks. Yet, somehow, we clicked perfectly. She was so sweet and shy, and she could never handle my teasing. I would constantly joke around and beg her to send me pictures of her abs. Every single time, she would shyly try to decline, claiming it just wasn't proper. But then she would always carefully find the perfect angle and send over a dozen photos anyway. The elegant, clean lines of her neck and shoulders, her sharp, delicate collarbones, and her tight-toned midriff. She looked incredibly reserved, yet breathtakingly sexy. The duality was absolutely stunning. I would push my luck and tease her, saying I needed to pay a premium to unlock the rest of the view. and she would deadpan send me 2 dense academic papers in English, telling me to finish reading them before unlocking the rest. My basic English skills were already incredibly shaky, and I had absolutely no idea what to do with a screen completely full of foreign text. I could only raise my hands and admit defeat, but the longer I spent time with her, the more I realized just how outstanding she really was. She was a doctorate candidate at a top-tier university, deeply immersed in the complex field of physics, a total genius scholar in the eyes of everyone else, and the exact model of an exemplary student that my father admired the most. But me? I was just an ordinary college junior when we first met and chatted, and I learned she was 27 years old and fully dedicated to physics. My vanity temporarily got the best of me. It also happened to be right when my father was holding my miserable 60-point final exam score, scolding me harshly and putting me down to the absolute extreme. Driven purely by hurt pride, I had a sudden rush of blood to my head and casually spun a massive, ridiculous web of lies. When she said she was a graduate student working on her doctorate, I lied and claimed that I was also a physics grad student. When she said her height was 5'9", I casually lied and said I was 5'10". When she spoke of dedicating her entire life to physics research, I ridiculously joked that I had already won the Nobel Prize in Literature. The funny thing was, the 25 years of age I claimed to be was actually my college entrance exam physics score, and the so-called 78 was just the measly word count of an essay I had once written. My entire life had been a script written by my strict, overbearing family, right down to trapping me in the exact same university where my father taught. Now, in my early 20s, I was an absolute loser in the romance department. Zero experience. That is, until my online relationship with Vivian. She was my absolute first love, pure, wholesome, and strictly platonic without so much as holding hands or sharing a hug. I was completely addicted to her sweet, gentle vibe, but my own pathetic, ordinary reality ate away at my confidence. To keep her, I hid behind a totally fake identity, hanging on by a thread. But a fragile bubble built entirely on lies is always bound to burst. I stared blankly at my phone screen, completely panicking, desperately scraping the bottom of the barrel for the right words, trying to spin some total bullshit excuse to save myself. But a second later, a new message from Vivian popped up, stopping my racing heart dead in its tracks. She actually handed me an out, softly convincing herself instead. Some schools do arrange fitness tests for graduate students. I must have messed up the details. I am so sorry, babe. I totally misunderstood you. Right after that came another sweet, comforting text. You have worked so hard, babe. Make sure you get plenty of rest after your run, and go buy yourself a massive, delicious meal to treat yourself. Attached to the text was a massive money transfer of 5,200 yuan. Finally, she added, I am about to head into a research group meeting. Let's talk later, okay? But I wasn't stupid. I felt the freezing, icy distance dripping from her words. No cute emojis, no sweet, rambling chatter. Even her apology and comforting words felt painfully stiff, like a polite email to a stranger. On the surface, she forgave me. But in reality, she didn't buy a single word of my pathetic excuse. For the entire rest of the night, every single text I sent, every little detail of my day I shared, and all my desperate, clumsy attempts to act cute just vanished into thin air. Radio silence. She never replied to another message. A crushing weight settled heavily on my chest, and suddenly, I didn't care about anything anymore. Defeated, I just dragged myself into bed early. My dorm room was still blazing with light. My roommates were huddled around a table, gossiping loudly and buzzing with crazy energy. While I was busy drowning in my own misery, a juicy piece of their conversation drifted over, and my ears instantly perked up. Yo, did you guys hear? The quantum mechanics professor is out of town this week, and the substitute teacher is an absolute bombshell. Wait, seriously? Dude, I have literally never gone to that class once. But if the teacher is a total babe, I am absolutely claiming a front row seat tomorrow. Oh, it is totally real. The guys in class also said the front row is already locked down and completely packed. Get this, she is only 27, and she is right here from our own university, a PhD candidate. We are talking about a certified geniacom beauty. Man, a gorgeous woman on that level has got to be taken by now. We do not stand a ghost of a chance. Actually, I heard someone boldly asked if she had a boyfriend, and she coldly told them to ask via the online course portal app. It is giving hardcore single do not disturb energy. The whole room cracked up and started making jokes except for my roommate Ethan, who sat there weirdly silent. He was slowly fixing his hair in front of the mirror, casually spritzing it with styling spray, wearing this bizarre, smug look on his face. Suddenly, someone remembered something, leaned in, and nudged him. "Hey, Ethan, don't you hang out with a ton of upperclassmen and older female students? Hold up. I heard this crazy hot PhD teacher is actually your childhood friend." The second those words dropped, the whole squad swarmed him. The air practically crackled with juicy gossip. "Bro, is that for real? Childhood friends? Dude, that is straight out of a freaking romance novel." Ethan's ears burned bright red from all the insane hype. He awkwardly turned his face away, trying to play it cool, but he couldn't hide that giddy, bashful smirk. I couldn't help myself. I poked my head out from my bed curtain, bubbling with curiosity, and just casually pointed out, "Wait, if one of you is a PhD student and the other is just an undergrad, that means when you were back in elementary school and she was already in college. How the hell did you two grow up going to school together?" As soon as those words left my mouth, the rowdy dorm room went dead, painfully silent. Ethan's smug expression completely shattered. He grabbed his head, instantly ruining his meticulously gelled hair with his frantic, shaking hands. He leaped to his feet, stormed right up to my bed, glared up at me, and screamed in an absolute fury. "If you do not know how to talk, keep your damn mouth shut. You are just insanely jealous of me. Tomorrow in class, you are sitting your ass in the front row with me. I am going to make you see with your own two eyes whether we are childhood friends or not." The next morning rolled around, and a furious Ethan literally dragged me straight to the front row of the lecture hall, while I awkwardly clutched a breakfast bun. My chest still felt incredibly heavy, a massive knot of anxiety tightening inside me. Vivian still hadn't texted back. Refusing to just roll over and give up, I fired off one more message. "Hey, what are you up to?" This time, her reply was instant. "Getting ready for class." My heart did a wild backflip but then slammed straight into the ground. I had memorized her schedule before, and I knew for a total, absolute fact she didn't have a single class today. Just as I was drowning in confusion, a massive wave of gasps and whispers exploded near the classroom door. My buddy Ethan jammed his elbow into my ribs, wildly pointing toward the entrance. "Dude, Vivian is here." I instinctively looked up, and man, my blood went ice cold. My breath literally hitched in my throat. A ridiculously stunning woman with legs for days strolled into the room, her posture insanely tall and elegant, with literal runway model proportions that instantly snatched every eyeball in the place. She was rocking a pair of razor-sharp, tailored trousers that showed off a tiny waist and flawless posture. Her shoulders were perfectly squared, looking like she meant serious business. And her face? Absolute perfection. She could have easily wiped the floor with any A-list celebrity. A delicate pair of fine, gold-rimmed glasses rested on the high bridge of her nose. Her almond eyes tilted up at the corners, framed by incredibly thick, dark lashes. But her gaze? It was piercingly cold, radiating this intense, untouchable aura that screamed, "Back the heck off." Her face was a total mask of ice, completely unfazed and ridiculously aloof. Clearly used to rooms full of drooling students, she casually strolled straight up to the lecture podium. Sitting this close, I could practically feel the freezing chill in her eyes and see just how flawlessly sharp her features really were. Next to me, Ethan immediately sat up perfectly straight. He gave a little wave, and suddenly, his voice went totally soft and sweet. "Good morning, Vivian." Hearing her name, she looked up, and wow, the absolute glacier in her eyes instantly melted away when she looked at him. Her expression totally softened, her lips curling into a tiny smirk as she murmured, "Morning." The guys sitting right behind us basically lost their minds, silently screaming in the back rows and frantically waving their arms. But then, her eyes drifted away from Ethan, slowly sliding to the left, and locked dead onto me. And dude, that look, it was deeply bizarre. It was packed with heavy scrutiny, a hint of mockery, and this weird flash of sudden realization. She just stared at me, unblinking. I completely froze under that laser beam stare, panicking hard. I instinctively ducked my head to dodge her eyes, but the second I looked down, my whole body went numb. I had brought the completely wrong freaking textbook. Both books had these insanely similar red and blue covers. By some absolute stroke of nightmare luck, I was sitting in an advanced physics lecture holding Appreciation of Masterpiece Paintings. My face went up in flames, burning hot, and a massive, crushing wave of pure humiliation washed right over me. I quickly ducked my head down and mumbled, "I'm so sorry, Professor. I brought the wrong book." Ethan immediately jumped in to save my life. "Vivian, he didn't mean to. He can just share with me. Don't be mad." Vivian shot us a completely indifferent glance, her voice still sounding shockingly gentle, but dripping with obvious favoritism. "I'm not mad. Just be more careful next time." Man, my brain was an absolute tornado of stress and confusion. I sneakily pulled out my phone beneath the desk. I just had to vent to my online girlfriend about this total social suicide and heavily complain about how absolutely terrifying and icy this new substitute teacher was, and how she seemed totally impossible to deal with. I hit send, and boom, she replied almost instantly. Just like always. I ran into a totally bizarre student today, too. I'll spill all the tea after class. Seeing her message, my total panic instantly melted into this warm, goofy relief. I was just about to text back when the loud class bell suddenly blared out. Trapped in the front row, I didn't dare push my luck. So, I obediently slipped my phone away, propped up my chin, and completely zoned out. Okay, I had to admit, her voice was super crisp and honestly, kinda nice to listen to. Her words were sharp and punchy, but man, the longer I listened, the more strangely familiar she sounded. Her whole vibe and tone sounded exactly like Vivian, my online girlfriend. The weird thing was, my girl was always super soft and sweet online. But up there on the podium, she was an absolute boss. Every single word biting and sharp. A totally different aura. "Today, I finished grading your lab reports from last week," she announced, "and I'll be summarizing your common mistakes." Vivian stood tall on that podium, her icy eyes sweeping across the completely silent room. Her cool voice echoed through the massive lecture hall. Then, her eyes snapped right back to me. "I'd like to give a special shout-out to our very own resident expert." I froze like a deer in headlights, staring up like an absolute idiot. The faintest little smirk tugged at the corner of her mouth, turning into a totally mocking grin. Her voice rang out, absolutely roasting me in front of everyone. "Your lab report summary doesn't look like it was written by a guy. And frankly, it doesn't look like it was written by a girl, either. It truly possesses the chaotic, profound energy of a deranged historical giant. However, this set of experimental data looks highly unreasonable. Honestly, it doesn't even look legal. Wow, you must ditch class all the time, huh? Because skipping out and still managing to produce a lab report this incredibly creative, well, that takes some serious talent. Since you're clearly so busy pioneering bold new horizons in the world of physics, I guess from now on, I should just formally address you as Mr. Expert." Every single word she spat out was dripping with pure sarcasm, landing like a precise gut punch. Instantly, the eyes of every single student in the lecture hall whipped around, zeroing in on me like laser beams. Refusing to hold back, mocking whispers and muffled giggles erupted from every corner of the room. I was sweating bullets, stuck sitting on pins and needles with a completely dead heart, only praying the floor would open up and swallow me whole. Those 2 class periods were hands down the longest, most agonizingly torturous 40 minutes of my entire 18 years of existence. The second the sweet sound of the dismissal bell rang out, I snatched up my textbook and shot out of my seat, ready to make a run for it. But an icy voice drifted over from behind, callously stopping me right in my tracks. "Hold on just a moment, Mr. Expert." My feet glued to the floor, my whole body going completely rigid. Just as I nervously turned around, Ethan stepped up in front of me, humbly kissing up to ask her a question. His attitude was exceptionally enthusiastic. Trapped with absolutely nowhere to go, I could only lean awkwardly against the wall and wait. Bored out of my skull, I pulled out my phone. Still absolutely nothing, no new messages from my online girlfriend. Feeling totally frustrated and desperately needing to vent, I rapidly typed out a complaint. "Class is finally over. Whatever crazy encounter you dealt with today is nothing. My day has been an absolute, downright disaster. I just got publicly called out and viciously roasted by my teacher in front of everyone. Absolute social death, babe." The exact split second that message sent successfully, Vivian's phone sitting right up on the podium let out a soft chime. I instinctively jerked my head up, and my eyes just so happened to accidentally sweep right across her open laptop screen. She was unplugging her flash drive, and a WeChat pop-up notification instantly flashed with the contact name Ian. That was my exact WeChat username. My heart flatlined. A massive, icy wave of pure panic immediately swallowed my entire body. I desperately tried to talk myself down, praying it was just a coincidence. Maybe it was some weird abbreviation for Ethan, but the deep dread in my chest was already spreading like a blazing wildfire. A few agonizing moments later, Ethan finally finished asking his questions and headed out first. Leaving just the two of us alone in the massive, dead quiet lecture hall, Vivian slowly looked up at me, her voice totally flat and terrifyingly emotionless. "Mr. Expert, this lab report is a total failure. Rewrite the whole thing, and make sure you hand it in directly to Office 350. Otherwise, your entire participation grade will be dropping straight to a 0. Got it, Professor." I plastered on the stiffest, most painfully fake smile imaginable, using it as a chance to make my grand escape while she looked down to pack up her lesson plans and laptop. But out of the corner of my eye, I accidentally caught a tiny glimpse of something and I froze, completely solid. Peeking out from beneath her rolled-up shirt sleeve was a section of her pale, slender wrist, featuring one tiny, very specific brown mole. The exact position, the size, the shape. It was absolutely identical to the mole on the wrist from that spicy abs photo my online girlfriend had sent me before. A flawless match. Boom! A massive thunderbolt violently exploded in my brain. Every single coincidence ruthlessly stacked up on top of one another, completely shattering my wishful thinking. In one mind-blowing rush, I finally, belatedly connected all the terrifying dots. No wonder she always rejected my video calls. No wonder she was a total genius at everything physics-related. And no wonder there was such a whiplash-inducing contrast between her sudden spikes of cold, bossy dominance and her usual soft sweetness. The difference was literal, night and day. It all made sense why she could always perfectly cater to every single one of my preferences. My loving online girlfriend, that sweet, insanely considerate PhD student who always accommodated me, was the exact same terrifying woman standing right there on the podium. The very substitute teacher ruthlessly holding my entire academic grade in the palm of her hand. By the time I stumbled back into my dorm room, the explosive wave of class gossip still hadn't died down one bit. My thirsty roommates had secretly snapped a bunch of stealth photos of Vivian, spamming our group chat with endless, drooling praise, staring blankly at my screen full of her stunning photos, and then looking over at the non-stop, sweet messages she was currently blowing up my personal phone with. My brain practically short-circuited into a chaotic mess. She was still tirelessly reaching out to me, eagerly typing away. "Babe, oh my God, let me tell you about this utterly bizarre student I ran into today. He actually brought the completely wrong textbook to class, sat right up in the front row, and even rolled his eyes at me with this totally defiant look on his face. It was seriously ridiculous. Anyway, what happened with that awful, mean teacher you mentioned earlier? Did someone dare to bully you? Please don't be sad." Along with the text, she sent over a transfer of 5,200 yuan. "Go buy yourself a sweet treat to cheer up, baby. If anyone ever dares to give you a hard time, I'll personally write your entire research paper and smack them right in the face with it. Babe, hello? Don't ignore me. Can we please meet up soon? I hate the thought of you being sad all by yourself. Every single massive money transfer, every single gentle, comforting word, every single line was just overflowing with terrifyingly genuine devotion. Staring at those messages, a cold shiver of pure dread crawled right up my spine, leaving me absolutely mortified. That incredibly foolish, arrogant, and ridiculous slacker she was complaining about? Yeah, that was none other than me. I couldn't even begin to fathom the sheer heartbreak she'd feel when she finally blew my cover. Imagine finding out the sweet online boyfriend you've been doting on is actually a total fraud, a massive failure, a college junior whose lab report was a complete joke, the exact same slacker she'd just publicly humiliated in front of the whole class. How the heck would she react? Caught in a suffocating chokehold of fear and guilt, I completely lost my mind. I was terrified of our crazy online romance blowing up in my face. I dreaded shattering her expectations, but I was even more terrified of my dad finding out. If he ever caught wind of this mess, I'd be chewed out and completely destroyed without an ounce of mercy. In a sudden, desperate fit of panic, all the blood rushed straight to my head. I frantically typed out some half-baked, flimsy excuse, hit the block button on WeChat without a second thought, and nuked our entire connection. As for the failed assignment, I had zero choice but to swallow my pride and go crawling to my bitter academic rival for help, practically groveling to get him to salvage my lab report. The price? Buying him a whole month of free meals. After enduring his merciless, stinging mockery and grinding my gears through 2 ridiculously stressful days, I finally fixed the damn thing and printed out a spotless copy. Stealing my nerves, I marched straight toward her office to hand it in and face the music. But right as I reached her door, my distracted brain totally misfired. My foot slipped, I violently punted a potted plant, and clumsily stumbled to catch my balance. As my body lurched forward, a loud, panicked curse instinctively blasted right out of my mouth. Holy crap! Inside the wide-open office door, Vivian heard the racket and snapped her head up. Her brow furrowed with heavy anger, her gaze sharp, serious, and totally unblinking. She stared me down as if trying to pierce right through my pathetic disguise and expose all my guilt. I froze dead in my tracks, so intensely mortified that I just wanted the floor to swallow me whole, desperately fighting the urge to smack myself across the face for not keeping my big, stupid mouth shut. Forcing myself to man up, I dragged my feet into the office and held out the rewritten report. She snatched it from my hands, dropping her eyes to grate it in absolute, terrifying silence. Since she didn't tell me to get lost, I was forced to just stand there like a totally obedient puppy. Bored out of my mind and sweating bullets, I stole a quiet glance at her only to realize she looked way more drained than she ever did during lectures. Faint dark circles cast heavy shadows under her eyes, and her desk was an absolute disaster zone, completely buried in crumpled up scratch paper. It turns out the crushing pressure of being a genius, PhD scholar was way heavier than I'd ever imagined. Back when we were dating online, I'd only ever seen her gentle, super sweet side. I never once noticed how utterly exhausted and stressed she truly was. I silently tried to convince myself that blocking her and cutting ties was probably doing her a huge favor anyway. After all, this absurd online romance had been built on a massive pile of lies from day one. So, killing it off before the truth came out felt like the only logical choice. But just as my mind started drifting, familiar footsteps echoed outside the door. My dad casually strolled in, clutching his trusty thermos. He was rocking that same old suit jacket from years ago, his hair thinning at the crown. It was the exact, comforting sight I'd known my whole life. He walked right up, gently ruffled my hair, dug 2 pieces of candy out of his pocket, and shoved them right into my palm. With a voice overflowing with total dad-level affection, he said, "My silly boy, what are you doing hiding out in here? Your mom just told me that the 800-meter fitness test totally wiped you out this week. Make sure you come home for dinner this weekend. Dad's gonna cook up a storm to build your strength right back up." I nodded frantically, my entire soul screaming at me to just drop the report and run for my life. But the second I turned my head, I crashed head-on into Vivian's intense gaze once again. The icy, detached glare in her eyes had completely vanished. In its place was a burning, fiercely intense wave of raw emotion. It was so complex and heavy, locking right onto me. It hid a wild mix of stinging betrayal and anger I couldn't fully read, topped off with a sudden, shocking spark of clarity. The moment she realized I was staring back, all those surging, messy emotions in Vivian's eyes instantly shattered. She frantically ripped her gaze away, the tips of her ears flushing a burning crimson that rapidly hijacked her cheeks. She looked exactly like someone whose deepest, darkest secret had just been dragged out into the broad daylight. She let out this incredibly awkward, soft little cough to mask the sudden tidal wave of panic and guilt flooding her chest. I just pursed my lips, completely baffled but secretly amused. The 800-meter fitness test, the botched lab reports. Every single one of those things was intimately tied to my real life. She clearly held all the cards and had me on a super tight leash this whole time. So, why on earth did she completely lose her cool the very second my dad walked in? I swear, she looked like an absolute nervous wreck. When you stripped it all away, she was just another bully punching down while cowering from the big dogs, all while hiding behind that grand, flawless mask of an ice-cold, genius scholar. But underneath it all, she didn't have a single ounce of real backbone. Choking back the absolute storm raging in my head, I slapped on a fake, perfectly polite customer service smile. "Thank you, Professor. I'll get out of your hair now." She kept her eyes glued to the floor, those long eyelashes completely masking whatever emotion was flickering in her gaze, as she let out a muffled, quiet little grunt. Her voice sounded totally deadpan, but there was this tiny, almost invisible crack of absolute defeat hiding right under the surface. Later that night, right after lights out, my roommate Lucas busted through the dorm door looking like $1,000,000, completely decked out in serious designer gear. The guy had obviously spent hours making himself look totally flawless, and he was swaggering and holding this insanely fancy cake box. He slammed the cake down on the desk, spinning around to brag, "Vivian got this for me. I'm cutting back on the sugar these days, so you guys go ahead and tear it up." Our entire dorm room instantly blew up like a powder keg. The guys completely mobbed him, their eyes practically glowing with juicy gossip as they relentlessly roasted him. "Lucas, bro, there is absolutely something shady going on between you and Professor Miller. She played the single card before, but it turns out you were the secret man all along. Private dinners, buying you cake. With a hookup like that, she's definitely playing favorites." Lucas just flashed this cocky little smirk without saying a single word. You could practically see the arrogant pride and that secret intimacy swimming right there in his eyes. He was totally eating it up, letting them hype him to the moon. I just leaned back against my bed rail, watching the whole circus in dead silence. But when I randomly glanced up, I crashed straight into his gaze. The dude kept obsessively checking my reaction. It was this freaky, secretive stare that just kept crawling over me, making my skin crawl and twisting this heavy, suffocating knot right in the middle of my chest. Honestly, I was way too burnt out to play his stupid mind games. I just reached over and popped open the cake box, making sure to project my voice as I threw out a careless, "Wow, seriously? Only 2 slices? Vivian must have been terrified you'd waste it if she bought the whole thing." The second those words dropped, I doubled down with completely faked indifference. But count me out. I'm the only guy in here who actually has to watch his weight, so I'm skipping the sugar. Let Leo and Marcus go wild. To be perfectly honest, I wouldn't have touched that thing if you paid me. Because let's be real, with all that cash Vivian had secretly wired into my account earlier, I'd already completely spoiled myself with a mountain of top-tier snacks. My cravings were 100% dead and gone. Staring at that sad little cake now, it just looked painfully basic and totally gross. But right as Leo was jamming his fork into a slice, he totally froze. His eyebrows shot up as it hit him. "Yo, hold on a second. This doesn't make any sense. Lucas, bro, aren't you violently allergic to mangoes? Like, you literally gag just from breathing it in. Why the hell would Professor Miller buy you a mango cake?" The split second those words hung in the air, the entire dorm room went graveyard silent. It was true. We all knew it. Lucas's mango allergy was absolutely borderline lethal. If he touched even a microscopic drop of the stuff, it was game over. Lucas's hand completely locked up on his phone. That smug smirk instantly cracked into concrete, and absolute raw panic violently flashed right through his eyes. Before anyone could blink, he flipped into this insane, hyper-defensive rage, completely snapping at the guys like a rabid dog. "Can you just eat the damn cake and keep your mouths shut? Why do you always have so much crap to say? Shove it in and shut up." Leo and Marcus instantly clamped their jaws shut, absolutely terrified to drop even one more joke. But me? My fingers practically crushed my phone as my brain suddenly launched into overdrive, piecing it all together. It hit me with crystal clarity. I remembered rambling to her 1,000,000 different times back when we were secretly dating online, straight up telling her that anything mango was my absolute obsession. Mango boba, mango tarts, I was absolutely addicted to all of it. I'd even whined to her about how my jerk of a roommate was horribly allergic, so I literally never dared to buy it on campus, only sneaking a bite when I went back home for the holidays. Right then, a massive, earth-shattering realization slammed into my chest. Vivian hadn't forgotten about Lucas's deadly allergy at all. That cake? She had bought it specifically for me from the very start. The woman was intensely gentle, razor-sharp, and obsessively thoughtful about every single detail. When she actually loved you, she couldn't hide a single drop of that burning warmth, no matter how hard she tried. But when it came to dealing with everyone else, her attempts to cover her tracks were just laughably, sloppy, and completely careless. This sick, twisted, emotional tug-of-war ripped right through me, turning my chest so sour and bitter I felt like I couldn't even breathe. Come Saturday, I was originally supposed to head back home for a family dinner. When my academic rival, Kevin, found out, he annoyed the absolute hell out of me. He insisted on tagging along just because he was craving my mom's handmade potato dumplings. I just couldn't win the argument against him. Plus, I really had promised the guy before that I'd buy him dinner to pay off an old debt. Left with zero options, I reluctantly caved, bringing him along to wait outside the faculty building for my dad to finish work. Now, Kevin always loved messing around and acting like a total jerk, constantly catching me off guard. Out of nowhere, he reached over and snatched the baseball cap right off my head. I hadn't washed my hair in 2 days. That messy, greasy bird's nest was hidden under that hat as my very last shred of dignity. The absolute instant that hat was torn away, I was so mortified, I wanted to die right then and there. Feeling exactly like I was standing completely naked in public, I instantly blew my top, raising my fist to punch him with a sharp, aggressive swing. But Kevin's reflexes were freakishly fast. He snatched my wrist in a super tight grip and forced it down, pinning it firmly in place. Looking from a distance, our posture was incredibly intimate. Looking exactly like a cozy couple leaning into each other and holding hands. He cocked an eyebrow and mocked me. "Lucas, it's been so many years. Do you know how to do anything else besides throwing hands? Can you please grow up? Just a little bit." Seeing that I was still glaring daggers at him, thoroughly fuming, he suddenly leaned in close to my ear. He dropped his voice into a calculating whisper. "Hook me up with that handsome senior's contact info in your department, and I'll back off and get lost right now. I won't annoy you ever again." I instantly realized this snake had planned this all along. Just as I was about to snap and curse him out of the corner of my eye, I suddenly caught a glimpse. A tall, slender figure was walking over, not far away. It was Vivian. Even though we hadn't seen each other in just a few days, she had gotten so much thinner. Her face was paper white, completely devoid of color. Her lips were pale, and beneath her usual chilly aura, she was wrapped in this heavy, thick wave of exhaustion and loneliness. Her gaze locked precisely onto our pinned wrists, staring without even blinking. I saw with absolute, heartbreaking clarity the light in her eyes fade away, bit by bit. Her brows knitted tightly together, and all her disappointment, grievance, and bitter pain were laid completely bare across her face. I instantly froze, completely solid right where I stood. My mind spun into utter chaos, totally at a loss. Kevin, oblivious as ever, still hadn't noticed anything wrong. He just kept relentlessly pressing me in a whisper. "Well, are you giving it to me or not?" Faced with a nightmare situation I couldn't avoid, I could only steel myself, force a stiff smile, and awkwardly greet the person standing not far away. "Shh. Hello, Professor." Vivian's eyes remained heavily locked onto me. Her tone was cold as shards of ice, dripping with intense distance and pure spite. "Who's your professor? I wouldn't dare claim that title." As soon as the bitter words left her mouth, she didn't even wait for my response. She immediately took long, hurried strides to walk quickly away. Her retreating figure looked rushed, yet resolute, like someone desperately fleeing in defeat. The autumn wind howled, swirling up the dead, yellow leaves off the ground. As they brushed past her slender shoulders, that silhouette looked so incredibly isolated and lonely, making my chest suddenly tighten up with a dense, suffocating, dull ache. Once Vivian was finally far away, the frustration bottled up in my chest completely exploded. I kicked Kevin hard and snapped at him, shouting, "That senior has incredibly high standards. He'd never look twice at someone with a terrible temper like yours." Having dinner at home that night, the table was packed full of the home-cooked dishes I usually love the absolute most, but I just poked aimlessly at the food in my bowl with my chopsticks. I ate without tasting a single thing. It was like chewing on cardboard. Inside my head, playing over and over again on an endless loop, was Vivian's pale, lonely expression, replaying alongside those dull, lifeless eyes. My heart was just a tangled mess of conflicting emotions. It was so suffocating that I could barely breathe, desperately needing an outlet to vent my feelings out. Taking advantage of the exact moment my dad stepped out to take a call, I stood up, marched over to the fridge, and pulled out a can of light beer. Hey, I was an adult now. My mom would never seriously scold me for drinking a little low-alcohol beer at most. She'd just nag me a bit. My fingertip hooked onto the tab, cracking the can open with a soft, satisfying pop. Just as I was about to tilt my head back and take a sip, I saw my dad walking back out of the room with his phone in hand, muttering. Honestly, when you take a moment to look at everything, Vivian really is such a worrisome kid. Her condition lately has been completely terrible. She stays up late in the lab every single night, barely eating a few bites of food. She's literally given herself terrible stomach issues from running herself so ragged. The second her name dropped, my fingers crushed the aluminum can. Vivian. Just hearing it felt like a punch to the gut. Ice-cold beer foamed over the rim, dripping down my knuckles and making a sticky mess, but I could barely even feel it. A sudden, bone-deep freeze paralyzed me from the outside in. My absolute first instinct was to frantically dig out my phone, desperate to text her, to ask if she was okay, and to make sure she was actually getting proper medical care. But the exact second our chat popped up, reality slapped me in the face. I had blocked her ages ago. A suffocating wave of toxic guilt and bitter regret instantly crashed heavily over my chest. Completely oblivious, my dad kept rambling. She's got unfinished lab experiments, but she's being incredibly stubborn, working herself into the ground instead of resting. I need to head over to the hospital right now. Your mom is in the kitchen packing up some warm porridge and pastries for her. Don't drink any more of that beer. You need to drive safe. The second those words left his mouth, I shoved the can away, grabbed a handful of napkins to furiously scrub the mess off my hands, and locked eyes with my dad. Dad, I am driving you, I told him, my voice totally deadpan and urgent. I didn't take a single sip. I am perfectly sober. He looked at me like I was crazy. Are you absolutely sure you can even handle the wheel? I didn't even give him a choice. I swiped the keys right out of his hand and practically shoved him out the front door. Every second felt like an agonizing eternity. The midnight streets were totally empty, and we floored it to the hospital. When we finally pushed the door open, the room was suffocatingly quiet. Vivian was lying there on an IV drip, completely motionless. Her eyes were glued to the floor, looking entirely drained of life. Every ounce of that fierce, dominant boss energy she radiated in the classroom was totally gone. She just weakly propped her pale cheek against her hand. She looked hopelessly lost, like a helpless, abandoned kitten shivering in the cold. So incredibly fragile and pitiful. Just standing in that doorway looking at her, my heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. The ache was absolute torture. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to sprint to her bedside, pull her into my arms, and promise her everything would be okay. Of course, my dad was completely blind to the agonizing tension in the air. The moment he stepped inside, he went straight into professor mode. Why on earth aren't you taking better care of yourself? Your health is everything. I know I threw a ton of assignments at you lately, but we are way ahead of schedule. There is zero reason to work yourself into a hospital bed. Then, he paused, and with one casual joke, he unknowingly dropped a massive bomb on the room. What? Did you go through a messy breakup or something? A few weeks ago, you were constantly grinning at your phone screen, but lately, it's been totally dead, and you haven't even charged it. You look completely miserable. Pure panic shot up my spine. If he kept talking, the ugly truth was going to blow up right in our faces. I cut him off, my voice way too loud and completely desperate. Dad, can you seriously stop nagging her? At the sound of my voice, Vivian's heavy gaze snapped up. Her dark eyes locked dead onto mine, and she let out a soft, meaningful hum from her nose. Guilt absolutely swallowed me alive under her intense stare. I couldn't even handle looking at her, awkwardly breaking eye contact like a coward. My clueless dad just chuckled, totally convinced I was acting weird because I was terrified of a strict teacher. He laughed out loud, teasing, "You are always shaking in your boots around your professors. When are you going to grow a spine, kid?" Vivian finally spoke up. Her voice was weak and incredibly hoarse, but underneath all that, there was a tiny, fragile drop of warmth. "He's not scared of me," she murmured. "It's just the usual student-teacher dynamic. Plus, I am technically his senior." My dad dropped off the warm food on her nightstand. Just as he stood up, his cell phone started blasting a ringtone. He checked the caller ID, fired off a couple of quick instructions, and stepped right out into the hallway to answer it. The second the door clicked shut, the silence was absolute, just her and me. The atmosphere froze solid into a suffocating, painful awkwardness. I stood rooted to the linoleum floor, completely paralyzed by indecision. Honestly, I wanted to punch myself in the face. What absolute lunatic possessed me to recklessly follow him to this hospital in the first place? I was totally driven by blind emotions, deeply wishing someone would just give me a quick lobotomy to fix my brain. Right then, my only goal was to bolt before things got worse. I shifted my weight, desperately ready to turn on my heel and run away. "Hey, Junior!" Vivian suddenly called out to stop me. Her voice was incredibly soft, totally stripped of her usual biting sarcasm, carrying a devastating hint of a plea. My right hand has an IV needle jammed in it, so I can't really move it. Could you do me a huge favor and open this lunchbox for me? Being sick had completely stripped away every single bit of her armor. Right in that moment, she was so breathtakingly docile and vulnerable, there was no way in hell I could ever walk away. My mind raced, but before I could even overthink this whole bizarre situation, my body just moved on its own. I stepped right up, popped the container open, and handed her a spoon. "Hey, could you grab me a glass of water too?" she asked, her voice surprisingly soft. I didn't even hesitate. I poured some warm water and brought it right over to her. She reached out to take the cup, and the second I caught a glimpse of her slender, pale wrist, man, my heart just skipped a beat. My fingers completely gave out. The cup slipped, and the hot water splashed everywhere, spilling right over her leg. The soaking wet fabric clung tight to her skin, and absolute panic hit me like a truck. I scrambled for some tissues, desperately trying to wipe it off. Burning with guilt, I stammered, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I swear I didn't mean to do that." But Vivian just weakly raised her hand and gently pushed mine away. Her push was barely there, but it felt like a brick wall. When she spoke, her raspy voice was just dripping with raw heartbreak. She stared right into my eyes and whispered, "Just stop, Ian. Do you really hate me that much?" My lips parted, but nothing came out. 1,000 words were just choking me up. I stood there, totally paralyzed, completely unable to defend myself. Vivian had always been this sharp-tongued force of nature, keeping everyone at a distance. But beneath those thorns, she was incredibly fragile, picking up on every little shift in emotion. I honestly thought she was just using her authority as a professor to get payback, punishing me for lying and ghosting her. But seeing her completely shattered like this, my defensive walls just crumbled to dust. I crushed the damp tissues into a ball and tossed them into the trash, fighting back the intense bitterness rising in my throat. I forced a tough, uncaring smirk. "You're literally sick right now. So, where's the boyfriend? Why isn't he here taking care of you?" Yeah, it was a low blow, but I desperately needed to know who she really loved. The last spark of light in her eyes just died. Fresh tears immediately welled up, threatening to spill over. The silence between us stretched out forever, until she finally broke it with a fragile whisper. "I think he just doesn't love me anymore." I mentally scoffed, my inner jealousy flaring up. "Well, you didn't even know your so-called boyfriend's favorite flavor was mango," I thought bitterly. "You even mixed it up with your roommate's stupid mango allergy. You created this whole ridiculous mess yourself. Honestly, ending up like this, you totally brought it on yourself." But who was I kidding? Later that night, lying in bed and staring at Vivian's pinned chat, sleep was completely out of the question. I tossed and turned, wide awake. It hit me like a ton of bricks. The reason she looked so pale, so completely drained and broken, losing sleep night after night, it was all because I impulsively dumped her and cowardly blocked her number. Deep down, I knew the painful truth. I was still hopelessly in love with Vivian, and my feelings hadn't faded even a single drop. But confessing my true identity right now, that would only plunge us both into an incredibly awkward, messy disaster. Besides, I didn't have the guts to confess my web of lies and grovel on my knees, begging her for a second chance. The weekend finally dragged to an end, but the second I pushed open my dorm room door, I walked into my roommates, desperately begging Lucas for a massive favor. "Come on, Lucas, please. You gotta talk to Professor Miller. Beg her to extend this killer deadline by just a couple of days. We're drowning in homework this week. There is zero chance we can finish it. Seriously, man, you're the professor's favorite. She'll definitely hook you up." See, yesterday, Vivian posted a brutal new lab project on the school app. The deadline was practically tomorrow, and the workload was insane, leaving the whole class crying in sheer agony. Lucas played it cool at first, rubbing his neck like it was a huge hassle. But the absolute second he saw me walk in, he puffed out his chest, acting like the ultimate hero, and declared loudly, "All right, fine. I'll go have a little chat with Vivian." Just hearing him casually drop her first name sent a toxic wave of pure, fiery jealousy straight through my chest. Disgusted, I just spun on my heel and walked right back out. I suddenly remembered I still had a few brutal physical tests left to pass, especially the long jump, my absolute worst event. Hitting the track field for some grueling practice seemed like the perfect way to outrun my racing thoughts. Twilight was bleeding into the sky, and the crisp evening wind bit at my skin. The track was still buzzing, with students running and blowing off steam. I found a dark, empty corner of the field and just went at it. I threw myself over that white jump line again and again, pushing past my absolute limit, just hoping to scrape by with a passing grade. After what felt like hours of relentless jumping, my legs turned into heavy, burning lead. I sucked in a massive breath, violently swung my arms back, bent my trembling knees, and coiled up for one last, explosive leap. But then, my sneaker lost its grip. My foot completely gave out, pitching me violently forward as I crashed helplessly through the air. Out of absolute nowhere, a figure stepped directly into my path. With zero time to hit the brakes, I slammed straight into them. Instinct kicked in, and she wrapped her arms around me, her slender frame stumbling back a couple of steps from the sheer force. A soft, startled grunt slipped past her lips from taking the brunt of my clumsy collision. Panic spiked. I scrambled like a madman to find my footing, but my hands slipped, and my fingertips accidentally grazed a spot they definitely had no business touching. Boom! My mind went completely blank, my brain entirely short-circuited in a massive wave of pure panic. Have you felt around enough? A husky, dangerously familiar voice echoed right above my head, snapping me back to cold, hard reality in a flash. It was Vivian. Horrified, I yanked my hands back like I'd touched hot coals, frantically grabbing at her sleeves to pull myself upright in a totally clumsy, humiliating mess. She calmly raised a hand to smooth out the wrinkled fabric I had just bundled up, teasing me with a look of helpless, quiet amusement. Well, our little expert certainly refuses to miss out on a single opportunity, huh? Thank God for the pitch-black night and the terrible streetlights. Otherwise, she would have seen my face glowing bright, tomato red. Burning with absolute mortification, I ducked my head and fired off a frantic string of apologies. I am so sorry, Professor Miller. I swear I didn't do it on purpose. I was just out here, practicing the long jump. She just stared down at me. Her gaze was crystal clear and sharp as a knife, slicing right through me as if she could read every single hidden thought I had. You seem totally out of it today, and your mood is completely shot. My chest instantly tightened. Yeah, I couldn't exactly confess that my spinning brain and totally sleepless nights were 100% her fault. I had to pull a random excuse out of thin air to save my skin. It's just. That assignment deadline you gave us is way too brutal. My fundamentals are shaky, and I'm terrified I won't finish in time. I'm just stressing out, that's all. It was the ultimate, flawlessly safe excuse. I mentally patted myself on the back. Hearing this, Vivian just slowly raised a single eyebrow and stared at me in total silence, her dark eyes completely unreadable. She didn't seem to buy my garbage excuse for a second, but she mercifully decided not to call my bluff either. A thick, suffocating wave of awkward silence instantly crashed down between us. Desperate to change the subject, I forced a painfully fake laugh. Ha ha! Wow, look at the moon tonight, Professor. It's just so huge and round. It's completely overcast. There is no moon, she stated flatly, brutally popping my pathetic little bubble. Then she sighed, her tone softening. I'll think about extending that assignment deadline. But later that night, our dorm room totally exploded into pure chaos. One of my roommates was practically shrieking with joy. Lucas, you are an absolute legend. The assignment just got pushed back by a whole freaking week. I absolutely love you, man. Lucas just let out a couple of nervous chuckles, his voice sounding way too unsure of itself. Well, Vivian is pretty chill. I just brought it up casually, and she agreed on the spot. Lying in the dark, I tossed and turned, feeling like a heavy brick of suffocation and pure frustration was crushing my chest. Earlier today, she specifically told me she would only consider it. She definitely didn't agree to my face. So how the hell did it suddenly become official just because Lucas asked? A bitter, stinging wave of jealousy and total unfairness ripped right through my heart. I rolled over angrily in a huff, but because my stupid phone charging cable was way too short, I had to pathetically shimmy right back to where I started. My chest was overflowing with toxic frustration, and I had absolutely nowhere to vent it. The following afternoon, right after classes wrapped up, my dad called. He'd hit up some fancy academic exchange conference and packed a massive haul of high-end pastries for me. He was hanging back at the venue with Vivian to go over the meeting notes, so he told me to swing by and pick up the loot. I ended up sitting off to the side, happily stuffing my face with these delicate little cakes like a shameless freeloader. By the time I polished them off, only one tiny jar of blueberry jam was left standing. Now, I absolutely despised anything blueberry. The flavor was always so weirdly sour and horribly bitter. I stared at it, totally confused. My dad knew exactly what I liked, so why on earth would he specifically go out of his way to pack this gross blueberry jam? Right as I was sitting there, agonizing over how to get rid of the stuff, a light bulb went off. Kevin, that guy was a human garbage disposal. I figured I'd just haul it back to the dorm and pawn it off on him. Waving goodbye to the old man, I called out, "Hey Dad, I'm gonna take this last box back and give it to Kevin." The very second those words left my mouth, a sudden rustle echoed next to me. The thick folder in Vivian's hands just magically slipped right through her fingers. As it plummeted, it conveniently clipped the packing strap dangling off the edge of the table, sending all the remaining pastries crashing violently to the floor, shattering into pieces until they were a completely ruined, inedible disaster. She quickly looked down at the absolute wreckage, her voice trembling with a super rare, flustered panic. "Oh, I am so sorry, Junior." My hand just totally slipped. "Whatever will we do now?" But I just stood there in dead silence, watching her put on this totally calculated, fake panicked show. I knew exactly what game she was playing. When I just stood there giving her the silent treatment, she scrambled to do some quick damage control. "Hey, how about I grab your number and buy you a new one to make up for it?" I shot her down on reflex, smoothly tossing out the perfect excuse. "No, I'm good. It was just something I grabbed on the fly anyway. Plus, I really shouldn't be handing out my contact info to other girls. The one at home would get pretty mad." I made sure to lay the emphasis thick on the words, "the one at home." Out of the corner of my eye, I caught my dad's expression, and man, his face had turned absolutely thunderous. His heavy, intimidating glare was locked dead onto Vivian. The air in the room instantly dropped below freezing. Vivian pursed her lips. The spark in her eyes faded out completely as she quietly slid her phone back into her pocket, not saying another word. The very next day, I bought Kevin lunch to make good on my promise. He was practically radiating bitter resentment. The second his butt hit the chair, he started venting non-stop about Vivian. "Ian, dude, you have no idea. That Vivian chick is completely unhinged. She called on me 8 freaking times in just 2 class periods. And then she tanked my participation grade by 10 points when I couldn't answer her. And do you want to know the kind of garbage she was asking me? Why do peacocks fan their feathers? Why do humans need to eat? Do you like blueberries? What do you do in your free time?" I swear, she even asked me if quantum entanglement was harder to untangle than human emotional baggage. Who the hell asks that in a quantum mechanics class? Watching him absolutely lose his mind in this furious rant, I couldn't hold back anymore. I ducked my head and started snickering, getting way too much joy out of his suffering. Seeing me cracking up like a maniac, Kevin slammed his chopsticks down on the table in a total rage, crossed his arms, and glared daggers at me. "Are you seriously laughing right now? You don't have a single ounce of empathy, do you?" "Okay, look. It's mostly just because it's way too funny," I admitted honestly, giving him a shrug. Before, I was the only poor soul being targeted and kept on a short leash by her. So it was nice to finally have someone else sharing the misery. Kevin was so ticked off by my reaction that he sprang up, ready to storm out. But right as he got to his feet, an icy, all too familiar voice floated over from out of nowhere. "Oh, is the cute little couple having a lover's quarrel and threatening to break up?" Both of us snapped our heads around at the exact same time. Vivian was standing right there, though how long she'd been eavesdropping was anyone's guess. Her eyes drifted over us with cool indifference. Her face was totally unreadable, making it impossible to tell if she was just teasing or mocking us. Kevin completely lost it. He started waving his hands, desperately trying to clear his name in sheer panic. Who the heck is dating him? I have absolutely nothing to do with this guy. I saw right through his little act. He had spotted some handsome upperclassmen nearby and was terrified that being linked to me would ruin his chances of making a move. The amusement in Vivian's eyes only grew deeper, a playful edge bleeding into her voice. "Oh, really? Because you two look like a pretty perfect match to me." Kevin was hopelessly awkward and was absolutely zero match for her sharp tongue. Add in the whole terrifying teacher-student power dynamic, and the poor guy flushed beet red with anxiety. His eyes welled up as he spun on his heel and bolted out of the cafeteria like his life depended on it. Just like that, The chaotic cafeteria felt like it was empty, leaving only her and me. I grabbed my food tray, fully intending to make my own escape, but Vivian suddenly shot her arm out to block my path. I could see her fingertips trembling just a little bit. Her lips parted and closed over and over again, hesitating, before she finally forced out the question she'd been holding in for so long. Her voice was low and deadly serious. "Why did you block me?" My heart dropped into my stomach as I stared at her, pure shock written all over my face. I really thought I'd covered my tracks. So, how in the world had she seen through my disguise? I didn't dare try to guess what was running through her head right now. I had no idea if she wanted to settle the score and destroy me, or if she was actually trying to make amends. So, I committed to playing dumb all the way to the bitter end. "Professor Miller, you've got to be joking. I never even had your contact info in the first place." Vivian just slowly raised her eyebrows. Her gaze turned razor sharp as she absolutely obliterated my defense with a single sentence. "That cake that got dropped yesterday? It was blueberry. And I remember very clearly that my boyfriend absolutely hates blueberry." Panic flared hot in my chest, and I fired back before my brain could stop me. "That was Lucas. You managed to remember Lucas's mango allergy perfectly fine." Her heavy gaze locked right onto me, flashing with this heart-wrenching mix of grievance and bitter self-mockery. How could I ever forget the things my own boyfriend loves and hates? My jaw clamped shut. I was totally tongue-tied, my voice dying in my throat as my bravado completely evaporated. The more I tried to stumble through an excuse, the more it looked like a pathetic lie. While she was distracted, lost in her own painful memories, that sheer panic spiked in me again. I ducked right past her and bolted, not daring to stick around for even a second longer. Ever since that totally unexpected encounter in the cafeteria, I was completely out of it all day long. I couldn't sit still, couldn't stand straight, and kept zoning out right in the middle of lectures. My mind was an absolute wreck of panic and inner conflict. It wasn't until the guy next to me nudged me to scan the attendance QR code that I finally snapped back to reality, numbly pulling up the check-in screen. But the exact second my phone scanned that code, a massive chorus of gasps echoed across the entire classroom. I looked up blankly, and my blood ran freezing cold. I had completely messed up the scan, and somehow cast my personal chat profile directly onto the giant projector screen at the front of the room. Right there, pinned to the very top of my chats, was one name screaming for everyone to see: Vivian. The whole class instantly lost their minds, a wild wave of whispers erupting in every direction. Up on the podium, Vivian frowned, staring hard at the screen, before her piercing gaze locked dead onto me. The corner of her mouth twitched with this weird mix of exasperation and amusement. "Why don't you just come up here and teach the class yourself?" She raised her hand and slid the mouse over, totally ready to bail me out and close the window. But a split second later, her head snapped back up. A brilliant, undeniable spark suddenly lit up her dark eyes. She looked absolutely shocked, yet so utterly delighted, the corners of her mouth curling way up before she could even stop herself. It was a smile she just couldn't hide, vibrant, warm, and totally radiant. Naturally, the students in the front row immediately started giving her a hard time. "Professor, you are being way too obvious. Talk about playing favorites." Vivian just let out a soft, breathy chuckle. Her tone was gentle, but fiercely protective, mercilessly shutting down the peanut gallery. "Do you guys even have a clue what's actually going on here? Stop blindly jumping on the drama bandwagon." She reeled in her smile, picking up the heavy attendance roster. Her voice shifted back to crisp and professional. "Roll call." After running through every single name on that list, Lucas was the only guy missing. The idiot had stayed up until 4 in the morning binge-reading web novels, so there was zero chance he was dragging himself out of bed today. Right before leaving the dorms, we literally begged him to get someone to cover for him, but he was way too cocky. He swore up and down that Vivian never took attendance, and he figured even if she did, she'd let him slide. Well, today, Vivian showed zero mercy, slapping him with an instant, unexcused absence. This core major class had always been brutally strict. On day 1 of the semester, they made it crystal clear. 1 skipped class equaled an automatic fail. 0 exceptions. My 2 roommates just stared at each other, sharply sucking in a breath, before instantly blasting the hilariously bad news to Lucas in our dorm group chat. "Hey man, from now on, feel free to sleep in every single Wednesday morning. You've officially failed the class, so the pressure is totally off." Finally, the dismissal bell rang out, and the sea of students started shuffling out the door, fully expecting her to drag me over the coals for that mortifying screen share disaster, or completely tank my participation grade. I trudged up to the podium looking like a kicked puppy. But instead, she leaned in super close. She dropped her voice to a whisper, her tone heavy with this undeniable, pouty stubbornness. "Take me off your blocked list." Hearing that, the very last shred of my defenses just completely shattered. I threw caution to the wind, getting a little stubborn myself, playfully pushing back. "Why should I do that? I'm the one who dumped you back then. I never agreed to that." She fired back, staring straight into my soul. Her gaze was intense, burning, and fiercely stubborn. "I never gave you the okay, so it absolutely does not count as a breakup." My heart instantly did a massive flip, and I just couldn't help pushing my luck. "Wait, when on earth did you figure out I was actually your online boyfriend?" She softened, her voice dropping as she finally cleared up the massive storm of confusion in my head. "That last time you came by my office to drop off your lab report. The exact second that spicy little curse word slipped out of your mouth, I was about 80% sure. Later on, I actually tracked down Lucas to confirm it. I just had to know for sure if it was really you. But Lucas really didn't want us together." Vivian paused, her tone falling flat but hiding a sad hint of helplessness. "He told me you dumped me so coldly because you were with Kevin. He even lied right to my face, saying the mango cake I bought you was something you specifically regifted to him." Suddenly, it all clicked. I understood everything in an instant. The messy root cause of all our agonizing misunderstandings was finally dragged out into the light. "Lucas is just the kid next door from when we were little," Vivian explained, her voice melting into a soft, earnest whisper. "When my family went through a really dark time back then, his parents stepped up and helped us survive. I've only ever cared for him like a goofy younger brother, and I swear, I never once had any other intentions." "Then what was that whole thing about extending his deadline?" I asked, my voice still dripping with a lingering, bitter trace of jealousy. She let out a soft, breathy laugh, reaching out to gently ruffle my hair. Her touch was incredibly tender and doting. "I saw how completely stressed and anxious you looked yesterday, and I just couldn't bear to see you like that, so I pushed it back. It had absolutely nothing to do with Lucas. You little silly goose." She dropped her playful act, her gaze turning completely serious and devoted as she confessed every single word with crystal clarity. "I didn't fall for some fancy grad student title, nor did I fall for a 5'10" height. The one I truly love is you. Ian, I love the ridiculous jokes you send me. I love it when you share your daily meals, your boring little routines, and all that random gossip with me. I just love how vibrant and incredibly real you are. Whether you are a grad student or just a college junior, no matter what your status is, the person I have loved from the very beginning is simply you." As her burning affection washed over me full force, my heart rate went completely out of control. I was utterly panicked, yet so deeply, deeply moved. But deep down, I still felt a little awkward about the whole thing, muttering under my breath. "But you still threw our private chat history up on that giant projector screen and teased me in front of everyone like I was some kind of mascot." Meanwhile, back in the dorm room, Lucas was having an absolute, total breakdown. He had totally banked on his so-called closeness with Vivian to secure a guaranteed spot for grad school admission. Now that a failed class was officially plastered on his record, all of his big hopes were completely shattered into pieces. His eyes were bloodshot red with sheer anxiety, and he was pacing around the dorm, unable to sit or stand still. Our roommate Marcus tried to comfort him, saying, "Hey man, Professor Miller cares about you the most, right? If you just go give her a proper explanation, she will definitely calm down and help change your grade back." Hearing this, Lucas immediately whipped out his phone. But just as he was about to fire off a desperate message begging for mercy, he suddenly glanced at the chat window labeled Vivian and froze completely solid in his tracks. Leo, out of sheer curiosity, snatched the phone right out of his hand, asking in utter confusion, "Wait a second. Why is your chat history with Professor Miller completely empty? And why is her tone so totally cold and distant?" Lucas was both panicked and absolutely furious. His face flushed a bright, angry red as he snapped, "Stop scrolling through my damn phone!" But Leo just casually typed out a quick message begging for leniency and hit send anyway. The very next second, a bright red exclamation mark popped up on the screen. He had been blocked. The entire dorm room instantly went dead silent. Marcus suddenly shot a wild glance over at me, shouting in pure, unadulterated shock, "Holy crap, Isn't Professor Miller's profile picture the exact same one pinned right to the top of Ian's phone? With all the secrets finally laid bare for everyone to see, I just nodded calmly. My eyes were full of absolute relief as I said, yeah, she was my online girlfriend. And now, she is my official girlfriend. In that one glorious instant, all of Lucas's sneaky calculations and petty little schemes turned into an absolute, utter joke right in front of my very eyes. Vivian had completely blocked Lucas across all possible communication platforms, ruthlessly severing every last shred of connection between them. Over the next few days, Lucas stubbornly refused to give up. He frantically tried reaching out to Vivian to beg for mercy and apologize, but every single attempt completely sank to the bottom of the ocean. In the bitter end, he had absolutely no choice but to turn around and humbly come crawling to me, carrying a pitiful slice of mango cake. With tear-rimmed red eyes, he practically groveled, apologizing to me and begging me to put in a good word for him with Vivian. Looking down at that sad slice of mango cake, I curled my lips into a faint, satisfied smile, gently declining him. No, thanks. I really need to watch my weight, so I can't be eating any sweets right now. Soon after that whole mess, our actual course professor returned from his business trip, bringing Vivian's short substitute teaching stint to an official end. She meticulously handed over all the teaching materials from the past 2 weeks and truthfully reported every single attendance record. The regular professor was a brutally straightforward and rigid guy who followed the rules to the absolute letter. He flunked Luca and Tian right then and there, without showing a single ounce of leniency. Once she was no longer acting as my professor, that weird academic power dynamic between us completely dissolved into thin air. Yet, we still made a quiet, unspoken agreement not to breathe a single word of this to my dad. Vivian deeply respected all of my boundaries and choices, never once pressuring me to make our romantic relationship totally public. The funny thing was, whenever she was around my dad, she completely abandoned her usual professional, Ice Queen demeanor and became exceptionally attentive and docile. In the past, whenever she had to deal with my dad, she had always been completely composed, proper, and perfectly dignified. But now, she was acting incredibly humble and low profile at every single turn, putting herself in a completely subordinate position just for my sake. Despite standing at an impressive 5'9", she would frequently bow her head and nod submissively in front of my dad, listening to him with absolute obedience. Naturally, my dad was left completely flustered by this sudden shift in behavior. He spent every single day at home anxiously reflecting on his own actions, feeling thoroughly stressed out. He would just mutter, "Am I being way too harsh at school? Did I somehow manage to scare Vivian? Why is that kid acting so stiff and submissive around me lately?" Munching on a cracker while listening to my dad's complaints, I nearly choked on the spot, caught between crying and laughing out loud. I honestly couldn't bear to watch Vivian acting so incredibly humble and eager to please him anymore, so I marched straight to her office to give her a piece of my mind, telling her she was officially banned from sucking up to my dad, and absolutely no more bowing and scraping every single day. After obediently finishing up all of my annoying lab reports for me, she suddenly reached out, yanked me right into her arms, sat me straight on her lap, and lowered her head to press a gentle kiss to my lips. Her voice was low and husky as she whispered, "Got it. But if push comes to shove, I'll literally drop to my knees for your dad. Anything to keep my future father-in-law happy." She chuckled softly against my lips, her tone dripping with playful stubbornness. I frantically pushed her away, my heart practically hammering out of my chest in pure panic. After all, my dad's office was literally right next door. Even after toning down the deliberate bootlicking, Vivian stayed exceptionally meek and docile around him, leaving the poor guy feeling thoroughly overwhelmed and anxious all day long. When the winter solstice finally rolled around, my dad specifically invited her over to our place for dumplings, desperate to ease the awkward tension between them. "Hey, are you free for the holidays? Come on over for some homemade dumplings." Before he could even finish his sentence, Vivian jumped at the chance, her tone overflowing with genuine excitement. "Yes, I am totally free. Absolutely free anytime you want." By the time she showed up at our front door, she was hauling several massive bags of high-end gift boxes, her manners completely flawless, and her eager sincerity cranked to the absolute max. That insanely grand setup didn't look anything like a grad student visiting her professor's house. It looked exactly like someone showing up to meet the in-laws for the very first time, completely ready to impress. Taking advantage of the moment my parents were busy bustling around in the kitchen, She pinned me against the bedroom wall, claiming my lips in a deeply passionate, burning kiss. Since we hadn't seen each other in a few days, all of her intense longing was completely poured into the heat of that moment, dominant yet incredibly tender, kissing me breathless until my head was spinning. "Babe, I missed you so freaking much." She pressed her forehead against mine, her breath hot, her dark eyes swimming with intense, undisguised affection. Kissed into a total daze by her intoxicating scent, I boldly reached out to loosen the buttons on her shirt, sliding my fingertips inside to trace the familiar curves of her toned waist. Her entire body went rigid in an instant, and she quickly pinned down my mischievous hands, the tips of her ears turning blood red as she spoke in a raspy, restrained voice. "Stop playing around, baby. If your legs go weak and you can't even walk out of this room later, we are going to be in huge trouble." Looking at her crimson ear tips, I obediently pulled my hands away and hid them behind my back, yet she still couldn't bear to let me go, lowering her head to steal another tender, lingering kiss. But just as the mood was getting insanely intimate, my dad's heavy knock echoed from outside the door. "The dumplings are ready, you two. Come out and eat." We frantically smoothed down our rumpled clothes, faking absolute composure as we strolled out of the bedroom. My parents took one look at the two of us, instantly noting our slightly swollen, flushed lips, and exchanged a quick, meaningful glance. Their eyes were brimming with an all-knowing, deeply amused look. Trying her hardest to suppress a chuckle, my mom spoke up first. "Ian, how many times do I have to tell you not to sneak spicy snacks into your room? Look at how bright red your lips are from all that spice." My dad immediately chimed right in. "Exactly. And you even dragged Vivian down with you. Look, her lips are completely red, too. Hurry up and eat some dumplings to soothe that burn." Vivian and I exchanged a quick, flustered look, biting our tongues to hold back our laughter as we obediently bowed our heads. Deep down, we silently made a mental note. Next time, we definitely need to take things a little easier.